There are moments in history when a single mind dares to look into the darkness of the human soul and discovers not fear, but an entire universe waiting to be named. Imagine a man standing between science and myth, between reason and the mysterious depths of the psyche, asking questions that scholars for centuries were too afraid to confront. Why do people dream of symbols they've never seen? Why does humanity across continents share the same archetypes, the same fears, the same heroic images? And more importantly, what does that reveal about who we truly are? This is not simply the story of a psychologist. It is the journey of Carl Gustav Jung, the thinker who believed that understanding oneself begins not with logic, but with courage. The courage to descend into the hidden layers of the mind, where our true identity sleeps. Before we go deeper into Jung's world, I invite you to support this documentary journey. If you find meaning, inspiration, or even a spark of curiosity in today's video, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support gives me the strength to continue creating high-quality videos for the community, bringing forgotten wisdom, profound knowledge, and the stories of humanity's greatest thinkers back to life. Now, let us open the door to one of the most fascinating worlds ever imagined, the inner world of Carl Jung. The story of Jung does not begin with triumph, but with conflict. Born in Switzerland in 1875, young Carl grew up surrounded by books, religious discussions, and the unsettling feeling that life was far deeper than what adults pretended it to be. He sensed meaning in symbols long before he understood them, felt the tension between visible life and invisible forces long before he could name it. His father, a pastor weakened by doubt, unintentionally shaped Jung's lifelong fascination with the unseen spaces of the psyche. His mother, whose moods seemed to shift between earthly warmth and mysterious inner worlds, gave Jung an early glimpse into duality, what he would later call the interplay between consciousness and the shadow. Jung believed that every life contains two stories, the one we live in the daylight and the one that unfolds beneath it, shaping our behaviors without our awareness. This second story, the hidden story, is where Jung would spend his life exploring. His fascination with dreams began not as a scientific pursuit, but as a personal necessity. Dreams, visions, and strange symbolic images appeared to him not as illusions, but as messages from a part of the mind most people never dare to meet. While the world was moving toward rationalism and rigid scientific frameworks, Jung walked in the opposite direction, choosing to investigate the irrational, the mysterious, the ancient. He wanted to understand why humans carry myths within them, even when raised without them. As Jung grew, so did the worlds within him. Worlds filled with archetypes, primordial images, and the deep intuition that the human mind is not simply a machine, but a living landscape shaped by history, culture, and forces older than civilization itself. This intuition would become the foundation for analytical psychology, a discipline rooted in the belief that humans cannot be understood merely through behavior or biology. To truly know ourselves, Jung believed, we must confront the symbols that live inside us. He did not aim to heal only the mind. He wanted to heal the soul. The turning point in Jung's story begins with a partnership that once seemed destined to reshape the future of psychology. When Carl Jung met Sigmund Freud, the world witnessed the collision of two powerful intellects, each driven by the desire to decode the mysteries of the human mind. For a time, their bond was legendary. Freud saw Jung as the heir who would carry psychoanalysis beyond its fragile beginnings, the one who could legitimize it through scientific discipline and youthful brilliance. Jung, in return, admired Freud's courage and precision, sensing in him a man unafraid to challenge the moral rigidity of European society. Yet, beneath their mutual respect, lay fundamental differences waiting to erupt. Freud believed the psyche revolved primarily around repression and sexuality, a mechanical system governed by past traumas and instinctual drives. Jung, however, felt the human spirit stretched far beyond biology. He sensed that dreams carried not only repressed desires, but ancient symbols. He believed that every individual carried within them a collective memory, a psychological inheritance shaped by humanity's shared history. Where Freud saw pathology, Jung saw potential. Where Freud tried to decode the past, Jung wanted to illuminate the future. Their conversations, once filled with excitement, slowly became battles of ideology. Freud expected loyalty. Jung sought truth. The more Jung explored symbols, myths, and spiritual dimensions, the more Freud insisted he abandon such ideas, fearing they would undermine the scientific foundation of psychoanalysis. Jung could not commit intellectual betrayal, not to Freud, but to himself. He believed that reducing the psyche to merely sexual impulses stripped humanity of its depth. So the break became inevitable, not born of anger, but of necessity. Jung walked away from the man he once called a father figure, stepping into an uncertain wilderness. The aftermath was devastating. Jung was labeled a heretic by the psychoanalytic community. Former colleagues distanced themselves. His professional identity crumbled, leaving him isolated, misunderstood, and attacked from every direction. But what seemed like the lowest point of his life would become the beginning of his greatest transformation. Without the shadow of Freud, Jung finally confronted his own inner world, a journey that would later define him as one of the most daring explorers of the psyche. During this period of profound crisis, Jung experienced intense dreams and visions, images so vivid that he felt as though he were descending into the very depths of human consciousness. Instead of resisting, he recorded them meticulously, treating each symbol as a clue. This inward voyage became the seed of his magnum opus, the Red Book, a work that revealed not only the map of his inner world, but the psychological mechanisms at the heart of human experience. He realized that the mind was not a closed system, but a vast terrain shaped by universal patterns he would call archetypes. Jung's break with Freud was more than a professional separation. It was a spiritual rebirth. The world saw a conflict between two psychologists, but Jung knew he was undergoing something far deeper: the individuation of his own soul. As he stepped away from Freud's shadow, he walked into his own, determined to understand the darkness not as an enemy, but as a doorway to meaning. To understand Carl Jung's legacy, we must step with him into the moment he chose to face the most terrifying frontier any human can enter: the unexplored depths of his own unconscious. After the rupture with Freud, when the academic world turned its back on him, Jung realized that his crisis was not just professional, but existential. What he felt inside was not confusion. It was a calling, a force that demanded he stop looking at the human mind from the outside and instead dive into its interior. He knew that every myth he admired, every hero's journey he studied, began with a descent into darkness. And so, Jung embraced his. This was not a symbolic descent. It was literal, emotional, and psychologically overwhelming. He allowed his mind to bring forward images he had previously ignored. Ancient warriors, wise old men, powerful feminine figures, shadowy creatures, and landscapes that looked like they belonged to a forgotten era of humanity. Jung did not consider these hallucinations or signs of madness. He believed they were messages from a deeper layer of consciousness, a universal source he would later name the collective unconscious. Every night, Jung returned to this inner world with the mindset of an explorer, charting unclaimed territory. He drew what he saw, wrote dialogues with the figures he encountered, and observed the patterns emerging from these visions. The process was difficult, frightening, and at times overwhelming. But Jung believed that the imagination was not fiction. It was a language. The psyche spoke in symbols, and ignoring them meant ignoring one's true self. For Jung, the unconscious was not a monster to be tamed, but a partner waiting patiently for the conscious mind to finally listen. His descent was not without danger. Jung admitted that he often felt on the edge of psychological collapse. Yet something extraordinary happened. Instead of losing himself, he found a deeper center. He realized that confronting the unconscious did not destroy identity. It strengthened it. This understanding became the cornerstone of his most influential idea: individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are. Jung believed that people suffer not because they are broken, but because they are incomplete. The parts of themselves that they avoid, their fears, desires, memories, and hidden potentials, live in the unconscious, waiting to be integrated. To heal is not to erase the shadow, but to understand it. The images that Jung recorded became the Red Book, a text filled with vibrant illustrations and poetic reflections. For decades it remained unpublished, too personal and too powerful, a window into the most vulnerable period of his life. But it is also a testament to the courage required to face one's inner world. Jung wanted the world to know that growth begins when we stop running from the unknown within us. The unconscious is not an enemy. It is a reservoir of wisdom. Through this inner journey, Jung began to recognize universal themes, archetypes, that exist across cultures and eras. The hero, the mentor, the shadow, the child, the mother, the trickster. These figures were not inventions of stories. They were psychological realities embedded in the human spirit. The realization would become one of the greatest contributions to modern psychology, mythology, and storytelling itself. As Jung continued his exploration into the mysterious terrain of the psyche, he began to notice patterns emerging from the depths of his visions, from the myths he studied, and from the dreams of his patients. These patterns were not random. They repeated across cultures, across centuries, across individuals who had never met and never shared the same experiences. Jung realized he was witnessing something profound: the existence of universal structures underlying the human mind. He named these structures archetypes, the foundational symbols and motifs that shape the stories we tell and the identities we form. To Jung, archetypes were not merely literary devices or psychological anecdotes. They were primordial forces, inherited potentials that guide human perception long before we learn anything from society. They lived in what he called the collective unconscious, a shared psychological reservoir containing humanity's deepest memories and instincts. This idea set Jung apart from every psychologist of his era. While others focused on personal trauma, childhood experiences, or behavioral conditioning, Jung dared to propose that the human mind contains layers far older than the individual. He believed we carry within us the echoes of our ancestors, the wisdom of ancient civilizations, and the symbolic frameworks that all cultures intuitively recognize. Among the many archetypes Jung identified, one stands out as the most important: the self, the core of psychological wholeness that each person unconsciously strives toward. The self is not ego, not personality, not the character we perform for society. It is the totality of our potential, the inner blueprint of who we are capable of becoming. The journey toward the self is what Jung called individuation, the process through which a person learns to confront their shadow, integrate their hidden traits, and harmonize the conflicting parts of their identity. Alongside the self stood other powerful archetypes: The shadow represented the traits we reject or fear, the parts of ourselves we bury because society teaches us to hide them. Jung believed that people do not fear the darkness outside. They fear the darkness within. He warned that whatever we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves eventually controls us. The hero represented the courage to confront adversity, not in the outside world, but in the inner struggles each person faces. The anima and animus, our inner feminine and masculine energies, revealed that wholeness comes not from dominance, but from balance. The wise old man and the great mother symbolized guidance and nurturing forces that appear in myths, dreams, and spiritual experiences across human history. Jung saw these archetypes everywhere, in religions, in literature, in fairy tales, in ancient rituals, in modern films, and even in political movements. He believed that humanity creates stories not because we want entertainment, but because stories express the architecture of the psyche. A myth is not a fantasy to Jung. It is a coded message from the collective unconscious, a map showing what humans have always feared, desired, and fought to understand. This insight reshaped the world's understanding of psychology and culture. It explained why civilizations separated by oceans depict similar gods, why dreams contain symbols we have never seen, and why people feel drawn to certain narratives as if they resonate with something ancient inside them. Jung's theory suggested that humanity is bonded not just by biology, but by a shared inner world, a psychic heritage older than any nation or language. With this revelation, Jung transformed psychology into a bridge between science, mythology, philosophy, and spiritual understanding. He believed that to understand the mind, one must study both reason and imagination, both history and dreams, both consciousness and the collective forces beneath it. The psyche, he insisted, is not a machine. It is a mythic landscape. No concept in Jung's psychology has captured the modern imagination more powerfully than the shadow. To Jung, the shadow was not a metaphor for evil, nor a place of punishment. It was the unfiltered truth of who we are beneath the social mask. It contains the desires we suppress, the fears we avoid, the impulses we deny, and the potential we refuse to acknowledge. Jung believed that most people spend their entire lives trying to appear good rather than whole, polishing their persona to please society while burying the parts of themselves that feel unacceptable. But in that burial lies danger. The shadow does not disappear simply because we ignore it. It grows in silence, influencing our behavior from the depths of the unconscious, shaping our reactions, relationships, and decisions without our awareness. Jung understood the shadow not as a monster, but as a necessary counterpart to the light. Just as a flame cannot exist without casting darkness, personality cannot develop without the presence of its opposite. The shadow represents everything incomplete, unexplored, and unlived within us. He warned that the people we dislike, the situations we fear, and the traits we judge in others often reveal aspects of ourselves we refuse to face. Projection, he said, is the psychological mechanism through which the shadow becomes visible. When we condemn in others what we cannot accept in ourselves, we are seeing our own inner conflict reflected outward like a mirror. Facing the shadow is not pleasant, but Jung believed it is the first true step toward maturity. To confront it is to uncover hidden strengths buried alongside our weaknesses. Even dark impulses have roots in something meaningful. Anger may hide a longing for justice. Envy may conceal an unexpressed desire to grow. Fear may signal the possibility of transformation. Jung insisted that integrating the shadow does not require becoming perfect. It requires becoming honest. He wrote that people do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It is a difficult process, but without it, no real psychological development can occur. In many of Jung's patients, the moment they met their shadow became the moment their lives changed. Those who appeared gentle discovered hidden aggression they needed to express constructively. Those who believed themselves strong found vulnerability that required protection. Those who played the role of the victim confronted their own capacity for manipulation. Each encounter revealed that the shadow was not an enemy, but a teacher, an inner guide showing what must be embraced for the person to become whole. Jung's exploration of the shadow extended into culture as well. He argued that societies, just like individuals, have collective shadows. When nations suppress uncomfortable truths about their history, identity, or morality, these truths reappear as social conflict, prejudice, or violence. Jung lived through 2 world wars and believed that much of the destruction came from collective unconscious forces overpowering rational thought. Humanity's failure to integrate its shadow, he warned, leads to catastrophe on a global scale. Every destructive movement begins with individuals refusing to see the darkness within themselves. Yet, Jung saw hope. He believed that when individuals confront their shadow courageously, they become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. True peace, he said, does not come from avoiding conflict, but from understanding oneself deeply enough to no longer fear what lies within. Integrating the shadow frees us from self-deception and opens the path toward authenticity. It is the gateway to individuation, the journey each person must take to become who they were meant to be. For Jung, the central purpose of human life is not success, not wealth, not social approval, but individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. Individuation is the psychological pilgrimage each person must undertake to discover who they truly are beneath the layers of expectation, culture, fear, and unconscious influence. Jung believed that humans are born with immense potential, yet most of this potential remains dormant because we are taught to fit in rather than to awaken. Individuation challenges this conformity. It demands that a person confront every hidden corner of their psyche, integrate every archetypal force within them, and move beyond the narrow identity society constructs for them. At the heart of individuation lies the relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious. Most people, Jung observed, live only in consciousness, the rational mind that makes decisions, sets goals, and responds to the world. But consciousness is only the surface of the ocean. Beneath it lies the vast, mysterious realm of the unconscious, where forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, archetypal energies, and hidden desires reside. Individuation bridges these 2 worlds. It is not an escape from reality, but a reconciliation with the totality of one's nature. Jung saw the unconscious as a guide rather than an enemy. Through dreams, fantasies, synchronicities, and emotional patterns, the unconscious communicates what the conscious mind needs to understand. When a person dreams repeatedly of the same symbol, when they feel drawn to certain stories or spiritual ideas, when they experience coincidences too meaningful to ignore, Jung believed these were invitations from the psyche. They signaled the next step in individuation. They encouraged the person to explore, reflect, and evolve. But individuation is not a comfortable journey. It requires confrontation with the shadow, acceptance of inner masculine or feminine energies, recognition of archetypal patterns, and the courage to abandon versions of the self that no longer serve. It demands humility, the willingness to admit that much of who we are has been shaped unconsciously. It demands bravery, the readiness to step beyond habits, identities, and worldviews we have carried for decades. And ultimately, it demands authenticity, the commitment to live in alignment with the deeper self rather than the expectations of society. Jung believed that individuation often begins with crisis. When a person feels lost, depressed, unfulfilled, or disconnected, the psyche is signaling that the old identity has reached its limit. These crises, painful as they may be, are thresholds. They are the beginning of transformation. Jung famously wrote that the greatest problems in life cannot be solved, but only outgrown. Individuation is this process of outgrowing fear, false beliefs, inherited traumas, and outdated roles. As individuation progresses, the individual becomes more capable of recognizing synchronicity, those mysterious alignments where inner meaning and outer events seem to mirror each other. Jung believed synchronicity was evidence that the psyche is not isolated, but connected to a larger field of intelligence. As people become more whole, they begin to sense purpose in their experiences, meaning in their struggles, and direction in their instincts. The end point of individuation is not perfection, but integration. A person who has individuated does not eliminate flaws, but understands them. They are not controlled by their shadow, but in dialogue with it. They do not repress their emotions, but express them with awareness. They feel connected not only to themselves, but to the world around them. To Jung, such a person becomes psychologically free, capable of living with depth, compassion, and inner strength. Individuation is the unfolding of the self, the realization of the person one was always meant to become. It is the greatest journey a human being can undertake. Carl Jung's ideas did not remain confined to academic psychology. They expanded outward like ripples from a stone dropped into deep water, reaching fields far beyond the walls of universities. Jung believed that the psyche was not isolated, but interconnected with culture, spirituality, creativity, and even the mysteries of the natural world. Because of this, his theories reshaped not only how we understand the human mind, but also how we interpret art, religion, myth, and the shared patterns that unite civilizations. Jung's influence today is so vast that many people speak his language without realizing it. Every time they talk about inner healing, archetypes, personal growth, or shadow work, they echo his ideas. One of Jung's most profound contributions was his reinterpretation of religion. Unlike many thinkers of his time, Jung did not dismiss spiritual experience as superstition or psychological weakness. He believed that religious symbols emerged from the deepest layers of the collective unconscious and served an essential purpose in human development. To him, myths, rituals, and sacred stories were not primitive fantasies, but expressions of archetypal truths. They provided meaning, direction, and psychological nourishment. Jung argued that modern society suffers not from too much spirituality, but from too little. When religion is abandoned without replacing it with something meaningful, people fall into anxiety, nihilism, and inner emptiness. His work encouraged individuals to rediscover the symbolic life, to reconnect with stories that speak to the soul, and to approach spirituality not with blind belief, but with psychological understanding. Jung's ideas also transformed the study of culture and the arts. Writers, painters, filmmakers, and musicians found in his theories a powerful framework for understanding creativity. Jung believed that art is not simply personal expression, but a conduit through which the collective unconscious communicates with the world. Great works of art resonate because they touch archetypes shared by all humanity. This is why certain stories remain universal. The hero's journey, the battle with the shadow, the encounter with the wise old man, the search for the self. Filmmakers like George Lucas openly credit Jungian psychology for shaping their narratives, demonstrating how deeply Jung's ideas have influenced modern storytelling. Through the language of archetypes, he gave creators a way to tap into timeless patterns that speak directly to the human heart. In addition to culture, Jung had a profound impact on science, especially in fields concerned with the mind-body connection. His exploration of synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence between inner thought and outer event, challenged the limits of traditional scientific models. While controversial, the concept invited researchers to explore the possibility that consciousness may interact with reality in ways not yet understood. Jung collaborated with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, suggesting that the boundaries between psychology and physics might be more porous than previously imagined. They believed that the universe might contain both physical and psychic dimensions woven together by patterns of meaning rather than pure chance. Jung's work also shaped modern psychotherapy. Practices such as dream analysis, inner child work, trauma integration, and depth therapy draw heavily from his ideas. Even contemporary approaches like mindfulness, cognitive reframing, and narrative psychology echo Jung's belief that healing requires understanding both the conscious and unconscious layers of the psyche. Therapists around the world rely on Jungian principles to help individuals navigate depression, identity crises, creative blocks, and existential confusion. His view that the psyche seeks wholeness continues to guide people toward deeper self-understanding and emotional resilience. Jung's legacy is not a museum artifact, but a living force. His insights continue to evolve and inspire, proving that the map he created is far from complete. It is an invitation, a guide for all who seek to understand themselves and the mysterious world within them. As Carl Jung reached the final decades of his life, he had already transformed the landscape of psychology. Yet he carried himself not as a conqueror of ideas, but as a humble explorer. He saw the psyche as an endless frontier, a realm where new insights always awaited those willing to listen. Jung often said that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and those words encapsulate the essence of everything he devoted himself to. He never believed he held the final answers. Instead, he offered a compass, a way of understanding the mind that encouraged each individual to embark on their own inner journey. Jung's later years were marked by reflection and refinement. He withdrew from public debates and turned his attention inward, much like the wise figures he described in his Archetypes. Visitors who met him during this time often described him as both grounded and otherworldly, a man who embodied a deep inner calm. He had confronted his shadow, integrated the many layers of his psyche, and reached a level of authenticity that gave his presence a magnetic, almost spiritual quality. He understood that human beings are not only rational creatures, but symbolic ones. We live through stories, guided by myths, shaped by inner forces older than history itself. Through his writings and lectures, Jung urged humanity to reclaim the symbolic life. He warned that modern civilization was losing touch with meaning. In a world driven by technology, materialism, and relentless speed, people were forgetting the importance of introspection and imagination. Jung believed that without a connection to the unconscious, society risks becoming spiritually hollow. He reminded us that progress without wisdom leads to imbalance, and that psychological ignorance can be more dangerous than physical disease. To him, healing the world begins with healing the individual soul, one person at a time, learning to listen to their inner voice, to confront their fears, and to awaken their full potential. One of Jung's final and most profound contributions was his insistence that the psyche is inherently oriented toward growth. Even in suffering, he saw the seeds of transformation. When someone faces anxiety, Jung suggested looking not for suppression, but for meaning, asking what the psyche is trying to communicate. When someone experiences crisis, he saw potential initiation, the beginning of individuation. He believed that the unconscious is not chaotic but purposeful, guiding each person toward wholeness if they are willing to engage with it. This perspective reshaped how people approach mental health, turning inner struggles from enemies into allies. Jung passed away in 1961, but his influence has only grown stronger. Today, his ideas echo in therapy rooms, universities, art studios, spiritual communities, and even on modern social media platforms where millions explore concepts like archetypes and the shadow. His theories form the backbone of countless books, films, and personal development movements. The world continues to rediscover Jung because he addressed questions that remain timeless. Who am I beneath my roles? Why do I dream what I dream? What unseen forces shape my decisions? How do I become whole? In the end, Jung's legacy is not merely his theories, but a deeper message: that the human soul is vast, meaningful, and worthy of exploration. He taught that every person carries a universe within them, and that the journey into that universe is the greatest adventure life offers. His life's work stands as a reminder that knowledge grows when we have the courage to confront our darkness, embrace our potential, and walk the path toward individuation. Jung did not give the world answers. He opened doors. And through those doors, generation after generation continues to search for truth. Not in the outside world, but in the luminous mystery of the mind.